So with everything going on in the world right now, I keep getting asked the question if the HELOC is dead, or do you think the HELOC is still viable in our current economic condition? And so I might be a little bit biased, but today I'm going to give you 3 big reasons why I think the HELOC will be viable in any market for likely all of eternity, or until we start living in spaceships or something other than our homes. But as long as people are still living in homes and real estate is still a thing, I believe the HELOC will be a tool we can use to tap into your home's equity. And so my first reason why the HELOC isn't dead and that it's definitely still a viable tool is that the HELOC isn't the only rate that's been increased. I shot a totally separate video up here that you can check out talking all about how HELOC rates are formulated, but in essence they're based on the federal funds rate, which is the same thing that lots of other lending products are based on as well. So if just HELOC rates went up by 20% and everything else remained flat, then yes, I would think that would be a valid point that the HELOC probably doesn't make sense anymore. But guys, everything else has gone up just about the same amount over the same time period. So in essence, we're all in the same position that we were before with the same options. We're just paying a little bit more for all of our options now. In some cases, you're going to be better off now going with the HELOC than you would have been before. Let's say if you locked in one of these historic low 2.65% interest rates that's fixed for 30 years, now I wouldn't even consider a cash out refinance. You want to keep that rate locked in for as long as possible. So now the HELOC is almost your only option to tap into your equity, whereas before you did have the cash out refinance as an option. If you want to see a video I shot about comparing the cash out refinance to a HELOC, check out this link here. But guys, yeah, I would not be touching these historic low mortgage rates if at all possible. So if you're in that scenario, the HELOC is likely going to be the tool of choice. And the second reason that I believe the HELOC isn't dead is that banks are in the business of lending money, and they look for every possible way to do that. And their favorite approach is lending on real estate, more specifically someone's primary residence. If you think about it from their perspective, they want collateral, or they want something in return for the things that they're lending money against, so that they know that they'll have a higher likelihood of you fulfilling your obligation to pay them back. And they really like the primary residence as their favorite collateral, because if things get ugly, the proverbial hits the fan, or you lose your job in a worst case scenario, are you gonna stop making payments on your boat, your RV, your student loans, or your house first, right? If you're anything like me, you're probably gonna be scratching and clawing everything you can to make sure your family has a roof over their head, and you can live without the boat, or you can have Fannie Mae come chasing you down for your student loan payments. But they love lending on real estate because, guys, this is one of the primary human needs. This is where you raise your family. This is where it keeps the rain off of your head in the middle of the night. And the data shows that real estate has a much lower foreclosure rate or repossession rate than things like automobiles, RVs, and boats, or anything else that consumers are taking debt out against. The home is typically the last straw that breaks. Unfortunately, sometimes it does happen, right? But if you had those 5 options to choose against and you were lending money out, which one of those are you going to feel the most confident and that the borrower is actually going to pay you your money back? And along that same note, people are always going to have equity for the banks to lend against. So I often talk about the twin tailwinds of real estate, which are the 2 factors that give you equity, which is both appreciation, the home's value going up over time, and then debt pay down, where each payment that you're making, you're paying off a portion of that mortgage, and they go in inverse directions, giving you your equity position. So even if the market goes down over a couple year period, over a 5 or 10 year period, you're always going to establish equity, unless you're just living in one of these markets that fall off a cliff or fall into the ocean in California. I don't know, but let's just say 99% of the time, you're always going to create equity if you hold a property long enough. And since you're always going to have that, the banks are always going to be willing and wanting to lend against that. All right, and lastly, guys, investors out there using the HELOCs to run their real estate business are not just going to stop and pack up shop just because rates have increased. The investors I know, they factor things into an equation. If the rates go up, hey, that just means that I can only pay X now for the property because I just factor that rate into my analysis when I'm coming up with how much I can pay for the deal. When we buy houses all the time, I tell sellers, hey, I would love to give you full market. Hey, I would love to give you $1 million for your house. You seem like a great person, and I understand you're in this situation, but at the end of the day, I'm running a business and I have to do this profitably. So I'm gonna put lots of variables into the machine and it's gonna spit out the result of a math equation, and that's gonna be the number I can pay you. There are some levers I can pull and turn based on your goals and your outcomes for the transaction, but some of these variables are fixed, and in this scenario, the HELOC is one of them where, hey, if you're gonna use the HELOC, or any money for that matter, even if it's hard money and it goes up, you just factor that in and say, well, now that I'm going to be paying against this rate throughout the rehab process, I can only pay this price for the home up front because I have to factor that in, and I still have to be able to make a profit on the other side. So all that to say, these investors are just adjusting and pivoting and are just running their numbers and analyzing deals now with the new HELOC rates, and they're coming off with offers and still submitting them and still successfully doing deals right now. I think that's the big takeaway I want you to have here is, everyone likes to scare you and tell you, oh, we can't be done. It's over. Everything's on pause, but that's just not the case. Now, have things slowed down? They certainly have, and that's the whole reason why we've increased rates in the first place. Inflation was getting out of hand and we needed to slow things down a little bit, so we did bump up the rates. So those are some of the tools in their toolbox to slow things down, and they're working. But by no means is real estate dead, and the HELOC is definitely still a viable option. But if you're gonna go out and use the HELOC, make sure you do it intelligently, as I really want you to be successful, and I've captured all of the best practices around how I use and invest with the HELOC in my book, Unlocking Millions. It can be purchased in the link here, and I'll put the link in the description as well. But if you got any value out of today's video, a like, subscribe, or share with someone else in your same position would be extremely grateful. But with that, guys, I'm Tyler Wayrung, and we'll catch you next time.